A special season of 4 films by Clara Law will be screening at the Nova Cinema from June 29th until the 20th of July. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the director of those films. As always, great to talk to Clara Law. Clara, welcome to Movie Metropolis again.
Hi, Peter. How are you? Nice to see you again.
You too. Great to talk to you. And this is such a terrific season of your, of 4 of your important films. How did it all come about?
Okay, so what happened was last year, Eddie and I we started shooting our second DIY film titled Ripples in the Mist. And we shot like two-thirds of it, maybe, or three-fifths of it in Taiwan, and then the rest in Melbourne. And like before, we were, doing a DIY, so our crew would be volunteers. And so we have got that in Taiwan. And we came back to Melbourne. We had started actually interviewing different candidates who most of them were uni graduates, all interested in to try. So that all began, the whole process of, getting them on to do that and training them. And there was like 3 days workshop. And then we filmed about like 12 days here. And when we came to and of course it was quite difficult for them. It was a challenge, but they all seemed to really like it because at the end of the last day of the shoot, they came, they didn't want to leave the set. They said they were all sitting there and we said, well, what are you doing? They said, we don't want it to finish, they said. So then we had a get together, wrap lunch, and then we asked them, if you don't want, we asked different of them different experiences, what they felt, and they were all saying that some of them were saying this is like a dream job, this is like they really want to learn and blah blah blah. So we said, why don't we set up a film club and you can start learning. So that was last year in June actually, and a year later they were still all there. They were one of them actually had learned, and we coached them, script writing and all of that, those. And one of them had a short film ready, quite ready. And because, even though, yeah, the same principle will apply, DIY, they will have to learn everything themselves. They have to do everything. We are going to lend them our equipment. So they will have the gear, but they still have lots of things that they will have to set up. So we suggested that we would use 4 of our films, like donate them for screening, for fundraising. And whatever that we could raise, it would be like a trust fund for them, to set up what this film club call is soccer with an F, FSOCA. That is the name of the film society. It's called the Film Society of Chinese Australia, and it is a non-profit organization. People who are interested can join, but of course, we have to interview all of them, so we could recruit new members. But at the same time, we will have a sort of trust fund ready for them when they finish the shoot, and then they can start doing post-production. And they do need, money for setting up some equipments, monitors, laptops, all of those to make sure that they can do the post. So that was the whole idea.
Ah, what an interesting backstory. That's yes, that's so well explained. So it's these 4 films starting on June 29th, one each week, will be screening at the Nova, and you'll be there with Eddie doing Q&As at the end of each film. How did
Yeah.
you decide which films you wanted to screen?
I think what we like to explore, or what we like to connect with the audience is, first of all, the idea of DIY, why we think it is so important, especially in the present time, because we don't have much support here in Australia. The funding is very, very little. I don't think it has added much, since we started, 25 years ago. And especially for like Australian Chinese, I don't think that since Floating Life, was there another, that kind of Chinese Australian story being told,
Mm.
and we are still working to make the second one. Um, so to be able to empower these young people to be able to tell the stories because they all have the stories to tell. Most of them came from Hong Kong. They study here. They still, try to make their home here, but they are still settling in, or they're trying to find a sense of purpose. So the whole idea is that with our 4 films, starting from Feral China to Autumn Moon to Floating Life to Drifting Petals, they all have that same theme, let's say, of uh, diaspora,
Yeah.
of displacement, of trying to find home, of wanting to also finding home, meaning also finding your own culture. Because being Chinese Australian, what does that mean? Like, when I was in Hong Kong, what does it mean to be Hong Kong Chinese? And now, what does it mean to be Australian Chinese? And I think all of them have the same question, but they have nothing. They have no skills. They don't know much about actually, like when we were young, art films. They have no idea what filmmaking was like. It was their first taste of making a film when they were on set on Ripples in the Mist. So all of this is with these 4 films, to illustrate the journey we traveled from feral China. And in a way, once when we did the retrospective in Vancouver, that was in January this year, with Eddie and I suddenly realized we actually had been putting as either a historical background or something of that sort as the story in each of our films from feral China onwards. Major things that had happened in Hong Kong to Hong Kong were in our films.
Mm.
Feral China, the 1989 Tiananmen Massacre, to Autumn Moon, the first diaspora, when the anxiety about the handover, the 1997 handover, to Floating Life, which is trying to find a home in Australia, so the new immigrants, to Drifting Petals, which is like the umbrella movement then in Hong Kong.
Right.
So all these major things that had happened to Hong Kong, this historical, very important event in Hong Kong was actually in our films.
Yes.
So it's like, a timely moment, we think, to put that all in an order so that people can see that, and at the same time trying to find, again, as I said, a sense of purpose, of knowing where they stand, of knowing how to proceed, how to move forward, how to find a place in Australia, how to contribute, how to be part of this history, and not to lose the opportunity to learn, to experience, and to find out, what it means, as they go about in their daily lives of, being Australian, but don't know what it is really, what it really means.
Mm.
And I think also in the process of watching our own films now, we realize that we actually have, whether we were aware of that in the beginning, but now very aware of, is the Chinese aesthetics that we have been exploring and trying to put in our film, where we think, film is as an art form, but that art form also, besides, cinema itself, also needs to have your own root, because you can be an Iranian, you can be a Canadian, you can be a British, and we are, our own history was different from all the rest, and you can say that it's unique, and we need to find that,
Mm.
and it has been in our films, and we are now even more trying to look deeper and more to the root of our origin, of where we are, where we stand, where we came from,
Yeah.
actually. And that's actually part of the film. And when I restore my graduation film when I was in England studying in National Film School, and my first film, They Say the Moon is Fuller Here. I actually realized that that also was part of history, because in the film, that was the time when Margaret Thatcher and Deng Xiaoping was discussing the future of Hong Kong. And that was actually the time also when I felt very much in a vacuum, because I was part of 5 foreign students studying in National Film School, and the other 4 all had a country to go back to. And I was wondering at the time, I'm a Hong Kongese, but I may go back to a Hong Kong that I'm not familiar with, or not sure what is going to become.
Mm.
So that also was, the first time when the event, what had happened was in my first film, which I didn't realize until recently, all of
Ah.
this.
How interesting to hear all of that, and yes, you weave those ideas, stories, cultural, historical perspectives, etc., so well into your films, especially the ones that are Chinese Australian in terms of their storyline. Let's quickly go through the 4 screenings. Um, Starting with June 29th with Floating Life, which was Australia's first ever Oscar submission for the foreign language category, which was obviously such a huge event for you and for the film. And you must have been quite excited by that.
Peter, but actually, when things were happening during the time, you actually were not aware. You actually didn't think much about it.
Yeah,
Okay, film, it would go to festivals, it would go to this, it would go to that. Oh, it seems to be part of life, part of the nature of filmmaking. So I
yeah.
wasn't really thinking about that at the time. But now that I look back,
Mhm.
so many years later, I realized that it was the first one. And that was why in 2019, that was when National Film Sound Archive, restored the film, digitally restore it, because they thought, it was of national significance. That was
Yeah.
what they told me. So yes, now you realize that all of this, when it's put in history, you realize that, okay, it's significant, it is important. And and it's important to go on, to make sure that this can continue, either, through us, me and Eddie, trying to continue to doing this more and more, or, trying to help younger Chinese Australian to be able to find their voice and tell the stories. So yes, Floating Life is like, the introduction to this event, because it is of such significance now that you think back on it.
Yes, such a wonderful film, and so that leads off the 4 film series at the Nova, and that's on June 29th. Now, July 6th is a film that I hadn't seen, but now I have, and it's the Australian premiere. I didn't realize that of Farewell China. Which hasn't been seen here, and it's the first screening now since 1990. What an amazing film it is about a couple trying to navigate their way out of China, and they end up in various circumstances in the US, in America, and their experience is not necessarily a pleasant one. I found that such an interesting story.
Yes, Fair China was made right after what had happened on June the 4th.
Ah,
And you could imagine how I felt at that time when I was, starting, to prepare and make the film
hmm,
in New York. And interestingly, or sadly, even now, there are many friends who have friends, either they were from China, or they have friends that came from China or in China, or now overseas, who is told by the parents now don't go back, which is kind of like, oh, what is going on?
Mm.
Many years later. So what happened at that time when we made Farewell China was there were news that we read. I think that there was one day I read about uh, one thing that happened in Japan. There was a Chinese girl. I think she was there to study in Japan, and she's committed suicide jumping onto the metro, the train passing. And so that was what started me thinking about, what's going on. And because when I was studying in England, there was a time when I was waiting for my graduation. For our films, normally we have to, our graduation only become complete when our films is shown in BAFTA. And twice a year they will show our graduation film uh, in BAFTA. So while I was waiting for that to happen, I went to New York and I worked for a little while in our cable television station. And that time I did a program on Chinese, American Chinese, who had made their home in New York. And I had done quite a lot of stories on them. And so I knew quite a bit about, the situation of those Chinese, especially women, actually, in those days, where they would stay, and then after a while they would come to a point where they have some mental issue, and it could be the anxiety, or the fact that they were away from home, or the hardship that they have to tolerate. So I've got quite a collection of this in my head already. So and so we wanted to write a story about that. And then June 4th happened. And so we also put in a little bit of that at the end of the story. So it's kind of from the first beginning writing the story to when we finished the script, when I actually had started filming, it was still progressing. It was still evolving in a bit. And there was the backstory to why we made it, or what I felt at that time when I made it.
It's an excellent film, and I think audiences will really appreciate it, especially as it is the Australian premiere. So that's July 6th, Farewell China. Then on July 13th, you've already mentioned, but Autumn Moon, which won some awards, Golden Leopard, etc. And this one sort of mixes food and culture and aspects of life again for Chinese people. It's again a really interesting film.
That was what happened was when I was talking to Eddie. I said, "Look, I really want to go back to the origin. I want it to be simple, uh, to be to somehow be deep at the same time, interesting, funny, but talking about things that is very much on my mind at that time was when I saw how Hong Kong had progressed to become this modern city, or more and more sophisticated. But at the same time, I felt a sense of alienation more and more, like the postmodern world. And that was what I want to look into at that time, because I think that was where we are, where we were at that time, in this postmodern world, and what that meant, the alienation between in the society, between people, and the loss of the sense of purpose, lost. People are lost. And at the same time, the young protagonist facing the fact that her parents want to move them to Canada, while when they apply for this, they cannot take their old parent with them because that would hamper the application. So the young protagonist was faced with the fact that her grandma, who she loved dearly, will not be able to come with them to Canada, while at the same time meeting with this young man, a Japanese man who is just trying to find his happiness in some material things in the world, but
mm,
couldn't find them. So they have this lovely platonic relationship struck up.
mm,
And I want to really look into the sprouting young soul, and still a young soul, but seems to be so aged and old already, and what that meant when they come together. And the young girl asking this guy all the stories. Why are you this? Why first kiss has to be like this? Why this? Why that? And pushing him to look back, to look inside himself. So that was how it became the like, the way we want to explore the stories and bring that to the audience of what it meant when you have your first kiss, your first love, your first everything.
mm,
And yet when you had that 1,000 kisses and 1,000 love, what does that mean? All of that coming to a point in the backdrop of Hong Kong in this, unstable, a state of anxiety of people not knowing what to do, and people trying to leave, and people trying to find a home somewhere, and really, that sense of a vacuum for them to finally find something within themselves to make them to move forward.
mm.
And that's probably what I can say in the most clear way.
You did, and again, such a wonderful film. Your stories are just so intricately constructed and filmed and so on. I'm very impressed. And the season rounds off on July 20th with Drifting Petals, which won an award at the Sydney Film Festival. And again, such an interesting film about
It was an award in
culture.
the Golden Horse, the best director.
That's right. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Golden Horse as well. Yes. So again, receiving awards for your films, which is so great to keep you moving forward and making more films. But anyway, Drifting Petals is a lovely way to round off the season.
Yes, Drifting Petals was our first DIY, which at that time you probably had made an interview with me on that.
Yes.
Drifting Petals was our first our experiment. That was when we felt that was in 2016 when we felt that we just didn't want to spend our whole life waiting. And yes, you can apply for funding, you can apply for try to make compromises with what is needed in the industry, what product they need. But at the same time, that is not what when I first started making films, that was not I wanted to do. I want to make films that I loved, and they were art house film. And like what Tarkovsky said, when film is not bothered by the fact of that this production cost, when film can be liberated from that,
Mm,
then it had the possibility of being the art of all art, the muse of all muse. And so the DIY was with this in mind. So with very, very minuscule money from us, buy our own equipment. They were not like professional. It was prosumer equipment. Setting up our own post-production studio, trying to look for like-minded young people who would like to learn, and we'll teach them, and small crew, and make the film happen. And that was what happened. And
mm,
when it was first shown in Sydney, in Palace Cinema, when we put our own DCP on the screen,
mm,
we were shocked in a happy way that, what we thought we could do at home, it actually radiated even better in the Palace Cinema, in an art house, a newly built cinema. The sound, the image, actually, it looks even clearer, the sound even more wrapping us around. And we knew that we had succeeded. And
yeah,
that was what we intend to continue. And that was why the second DIY, which we now is intensively doing our post-production, and at some same time wanting to share this joy with young people. Let them know that you can do it, especially you kids now growing up, in the digital age. You, of course, can learn all of that. So that was the whole thing. And of course, Drifting Petals has to be up there on the screen for people to look at and of course watch it as a film, but at the same time knowing that it is possible, all that potential.
Exactly. That is so well described. And I urge everyone watching this to go and see these four films and listen to Clara and Eddie as they talk about each of the films after each screening, starting on June 29th at the Nova Cinema. Look, it's terrific talking to you, Clara, and I just so admire your filmmaking and your storytelling and your approach to filmmaking as well, which is just so enlightening and so delightful. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to talk.
Good to talk to you, Clara, and I look forward to your next film. As you say, you're working on it now, which is fantastic.
Yes, we'll wait a little bit. Yes.
Okay, all the best, Clara. We've been speaking to Clara Law. All the best. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thanks.